So here we have the modern Jeskai Control. And this is a deck that has been around in the format for quite a while, yet we see some brand new cards in the deck as well. So we'll go over all of those in just a minute. The mana base is 3 colors, as you may have guessed by the name Jeskai. A bunch of fetch lands because there's multiple cards in the deck where you want to be able to get cards in your graveyard in order to make them as strong as possible. 3 Celestial Colonnades, your man land. It can win you the game. 4/4 flying. And yes, it comes into play tapped, so there's only 3 of them. We've got a bunch of removal. Jeskai Control is known for playing many of the best removal spells in the format. Path to Exile is the one that you prioritize the most, in that there's 4 copies compared to the other ones, because it can deal with anything for 1 mana and works really well with Snapcaster Mage. Then we also have our burn spells, which do double as removal. Lightning Bolt, Lightning Helix, in that now you have a burn spell that also gains life. Very important against decks like Burn. 2 copies of Electrolyze. This card is very versatile in that it's going to cantrip, so it's going to replace itself, but being able to play this against a deck like Affinity or decks with small creatures is really good. And then Supreme Verdict as our catch-all mass removal, and it's able to deal with multiple creatures at once. So you've got all of these removal spells. You've also got your 4 copies of Snapcaster Mage, your value creature. It works really well with some of these cheaper removal spells in that you can play it on, say, turn 3 or 4, and then use a removal spell alongside it. Then there's the card advantage. So Serum Vision's still probably the best card draw spell in Modern, in that 1 mana, and then the Scry 2 is really nice. 3 copies of Search for Azcanta. Not 1, not 2, but 3 of this card. And that is a lot, but it does a ton of work in the deck, being able to fill up the graveyard, and then once it flips, most of the deck, in fact, all of the deck besides the 4 Snapcaster Mage, and the lands, of course, but you can find all of these non-creature spells off of a flip Search for Azcanta. And then 1 negate, so we've got some counter spells. The negate is one of them. Then there's also 3 logic knots, so we're filling up our graveyard with the fetch lands, with the cheap removal spells, with the Search for Azcantas, and then we can delve a lot of that stuff away with logic knot. There's also 4 copies of Cryptic Command, so this is your card advantage, counterspell, catch-all card. And then 1 Secure the Waste, so we can use Secure the Waste as a win condition, but just creating a bunch of dorks can also just buy you a lot of time in a lot of matchups. And then 2 copies of Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, so this is the newest card in the deck, and it's a nice form of card advantage, and it's also the -3 effect of it is especially useful against the non-creature decks, like, say, a deck like Lantern Control, or against Boggles, maybe you want to get rid of an opposing aura. So there's a bunch of niche decks out there in the format. A card like Blood Moon, this can be an answer to. So it's a versatile answer type card, so you no longer need a card like Detention Sphere anymore. And it draws cards, it takes over the game. The ability to untap lands after the card draw is what makes it so amazing, because you can, say, play it and have Logic Knot up on turn 5. So, Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, the Planeswalker of choice here. There's no Jace the Mind Sculptor anymore. Teferi has essentially taken the place of Jace in this deck. So the sideboard is geared toward, well, it's a versatile sideboard because there's a ton of different decks in Modern, and you want to be able to have something for every strategy. The Damping Spheres are really important here. This is also a new card from Dominaria, and it helps in the traditionally tough matchups for Jeskai, like Storm, like Tron. You can board in Damping Sphere, and in specific matchups like those, this card is just going to be amazing. We've got some versatile removal like Engineered Explosives. Rune Halo can be removal. It can come in a variety of spots. Wear Tear, also Artifact or Enchantment, spot removal. Vendilion Click is another threat. It's generally good against the slower decks or the combo decks where you can sort of pick apart your opponent's hand and gives you more information. Some counter spells against combo decks and control decks. Celestial Purge is really good against Blood Moon or against, say Jund, for instance, decks with Liliana of the Veil. Settle the Wreckage, another sort of sweeper, but it is very good against Boggles because of the fact that it exiles the creatures, so it gets around opposing Umbras. Baneslayer Angel, it's a win condition, and a lot of times players are going to side out most or all of their removal against Jeskai Control, and then Baneslayer Angel can be a nice trump card to have access to. One copy of Elspeth's Sun's Champion as another Planeswalker, that it's a heavy hitter, it can close out games very quickly, and it's just a very high power level card. So this is the deck. It has a lot of play to it, a lot of decisions, a lot of interaction with the opponent. And so if you like that sort of style deck, this is certainly the control deck I recommend in Modern right now. So this game we're going to be on the draw. I am going to keep this hand, even though it has 2 copies of Search for Azcanta, which kind of is not where you want to be. The card is still very good, even if you draw. You don't want to draw multiples, but that is one of the risks that you take when playing 3 copies of the card. Nettle Sentinel, okay. So we're playing against Elves. Hopefully we're not a turn too slow. We are in the draw with Supreme Verdict, which means our opponent might just have one of those nutty elf hands where we're just not able to get our wrath down. We'll see. Hopefully that's not the case. We interestingly enough don't have any spot removal. No Bolt, no Path, no Helix. Which we would like. We would certainly like those cards here. So if our opponent has Heritage Druid plus another 1-drop elf, that's going to be bad news. And it looks like that's what's going to happen. So this allows them to now play a 3-mana card if they have it. Things are kind of getting away from us already in this one. Devoted Druid, okay, so they may have a Devoted Druid package in the deck. So possibly Vizier in there. This could be... Okay, it's another Devoted Druid. So our opponent's just able to completely unload their hand. If they have some sort of a payoff card as well, like a Chord, like a Company, one of the 3-mana elves, all of those cards would be bad for us. But our opponent passes the turn. Well, looks like they're not going to pass the turn. Okay, yep, there's the Azuri. So this essentially allows our opponent to threaten a win on the next turn, I believe. Because Devoted Druid plus Azuri, this is the nut draw, so I'm just going to concede. No way to beat this. Basically, once you get an Azuri activation, you can just keep untapping Devoted Druids and just go crazy. So that was the absolute nuts from the Elf deck. Hopefully we don't face that again in game 2. So in terms of sideboarding against Elves, well, we didn't see any Chords or Companies. We suspect that there are some of those types of cards in the deck. However, Negate is normally not where I want to be, considering we do have other counterspells like the Logic Knot. Secure the Waste is a little bit win. It's not even win more. It's not great. Here, I'd rather have a card like Elspeth or Baneslayer Angel. And I think we want Engineered Explosives here for if our opponent has a bunch of 1-mana elves. And then Settle the Wreckage is usable in the matchup. So in terms of sideboarding out cards, I think we can take out a Cryptic and a Search. Search for Azcanta is very good, for sure, but 3 copies is probably one more than we need here. Sometimes it's okay to shape one of those cards if you're not in playing against one of the control decks. Interesting hand. I am going to try this, I think. We do have that Serum Visions to lean on. And this is a Spire Bluff Canal, meaning we can cast the Serum Visions immediately. So a lot of times, if you have a turn 1 Visions, you have to keep and kind of hope that the Visions helps develop your hand a bit more. I think we want both. Well, yeah, I think we want both the Snapcaster and the Hallowed Fountain. Understand that we do have one snap already, but the card is just so good. And we can potentially just win the game with Snapcaster Mages. That is one of our avenues. So now the dilemma is, do we want to just go ahead and get rid of this Elvish Mystic? I am going to get rid of it. We don't know exactly what our opponent's hand is. It could be a Mana Light hand. I like using the Helix because next turn it allows us to make a play like Lightning Bolt plus Search for Azcanta or Lightning Bolt plus something else. So Heritage Druid by itself is not necessarily the scariest thing in the world. I think this is a good opportunity for us to get the Search for Azcanta into play and just say go. We're not worried about Court of Calling this turn. So our opponent is not doing anything close to what they were, anything close to what they did to us the previous game. So we have that going for us. We should be able to play more of our game plan here. And if our opponent tries to deploy something like a Dwinnen's Elite, we can respond with the Lightning Bolt to take out the Heritage Druid. Any type of 3-mana elf like an Azuri or Archdruid, we want to kill on sight. So there's an Archdruid. So I am going to use this Lightning Bolt to get rid of it. Take 1, sure. Cryptic we have to put in the graveyard considering our mana situation. Serum Visions is an interesting draw, but I think we just have to pass here because if we don't hit a land off the Visions, we might not be able to cast anything else on the following turn. Okay, Dwinnen's Elite. So I like getting one of these Snapcaster Mages into play now. We can Snapcaster plus Bolt in response. That way our opponent isn't going to get that Elf off the Elite, which is relevant. If it's just a 2/2, this is essentially a clean 2-for-1 because we can use our Snapcaster to potentially trade for the Dwinnen's Elite. But our opponent still has 4 cards in hand, so we know there's probably more gas coming. If we have a good opportunity, we can use the Field of Ruin to take our opponent off the Horizon Canopy. There's an Explosives. This isn't really a game where Explosives is looking great, at least not right now. Once again, was looking for a land. Did not find one. So I think, well, a couple options here for sure. We could Serum Visions, which is reasonable. We could also Snapcaster plus Serum Visions. I don't think we want to snap Serum because we may want to find an opening for this Supreme Verdict in our hand. Well, I'm going to go for this Serum Visions that's in our hand. We might not get the land. We got the path, but we see that we have lands on top of our deck. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to put the Steam Vents first because we can put that into our graveyard with the Search for Azcanta. And then draw the Flooded Strand. This deck really wants to be flipping Search as soon as possible. And now it's okay that we didn't do too much this turn. So sure, we'll trade because we're working towards setting up our Supreme Verdict. Actually, that was not a good trade for our opponent because now we can flip our Search. So we get to transform Azcanta. And I don't think we need to fire off the Supreme Verdict just yet. It's a little bit greedy waiting in this spot, but I think we can afford to do so considering the counter magic, counter spell in hand. So an attack, we will take that. So if our opponent is passing, potentially they could have a card like a Collected Company for sure. It's one of the cards we should be aware of, a little bit wary of. But we get to activate the Azcanta and gain some more value. Hopefully we find something off of it. All right, Serum Visions, Bolt, or Helix. I'm gonna go with the Helix. The life might be relevant. And we'll see if our opponent... Okay, so they are electing to just pass the turn now. Which I don't think we're terribly unhappy about. think I'm just going to pass back now. We don't really want to play Supreme Verdict and then have our opponent company into 2 really good elves and cheese us out that way. It's pretty unlikely to happen, but I think passing is relatively safe. So, yep, there's the collected company. We have the opportunity now to logic knot that collected company. I think that makes sense. Yeah, I'm gonna logic knot that for one. We don't actually have to delve here. It's always nice to randomly have a bunch of cards in the graveyard for later logic knots. I'm just gonna use the Helix to gain some of that life back. So we're not really under that much pressure. And this might... Okay, Eternal Witness. That's actually pretty good for our opponent. That can get back, say, the collected company. So, yeah, that's kind of annoying. Well, I think we still play the waiting game. I think our life total is at a high enough spot where we can afford to take this, but our opponent is being careful for sure. Interesting. So we have a choice between Elspeth and Logic Knot. I'm just going to go for the Logic Knot because we can use that Elspeth later. Our opponent can still say company into something like an Azuri, and it also kind of provokes them to play the company here, which is exactly what we want. We want our opponent to cast the company now so that we don't have to worry about it, and we can... Okay, so it's 2 Devoted Druids, which ended up not being the greatest collected company, but now we can untap and play the Supreme Verdict we've been holding onto and have Logic Knot up. So it looks, and this is what the Jeskai deck does. You know, it's slow, but eventually the card advantage will get your opponent. Azuri, I think that's fine, considering the removal we have. Yeah, we're not going to fight over that. No need to. So we could actually Snapcaster to kill this, or just Path to exile it. I think I'm gonna go with the Path line. So I'm just gonna Path it right here. And this is perfect. We could activate Celestial Colonnade as like a value play to get the Elvish Mystic off the board, but that just seems kind of unnecessary. Yeah, that resolves, sure. So we could actually Field of Ruin away the Horizon Canopy. That seems like a valuable play, for sure. Just to stop our opponent from being able to draw that card. And so we actually found a Supreme Verdict. Eventually we're going to win this game. If our opponent doesn't concede, we'll just grind it out. No problem. Oh wow, there's Teferi. We can actually play that here. So I think I'm gonna. Well, no, we don't have a. Well, okay, so we could play Teferi. Yeah, actually, I like playing Teferi a lot. So what I'm gonna do here is play the Teferi, and then we can Snapcaster, or just now we can just Supreme Verdict, which is probably just better than playing the Snap. And have the logic not up still when we get to untap those lands. So another Azuri. I guess I'll just Logic Knot it because we can Snapcaster plus Logic Knot later. And we don't really want our opponent to draw a Cavern of Souls to make the Logic Knot not as good. And this shouldn't be a surprise that the late game of the Elves deck is just vastly inferior to what we're doing. Definitely a variety of things we can do here. I'm just going to activate Search. Found a Bolt. Sure, why not? We'll Bolt this Llanowar Elves. And then we get to untap. We can untap our Azcanta so that we can reuse that. We could be trying to just kill our opponent, certainly. I guess I'll do that. I guess I'll do that. Try to end the game a little bit faster. Clocks are real. They're a real thing to be worried about when playing online. We do have less time than our opponent. There's so many little decisions with this Jeskai deck. Once you get into these later stages of the game, normally it's all a win, whichever line you take, but there's always one choice that's a little bit better than the other. And this works out. Have plenty of stuff in the graveyard to delve. And our opponent's finally seen enough. Okay. So game 3. Even though they can nut us by just having the draw like they had for game 1. Don't like Damping Sphere for sure. Most of this stuff isn't great. Dispel, it can counter Accompany. We haven't actually seen the chord, so we don't know that our opponent's playing chord. Normally, you just want a bunch of removal. And the key counter magic. I think we still want the Logic Knots. Yeah, let's just run it back. That felt pretty good last game. When you're top decking Llanowar Elves, they're a lot worse than when you have them on turn 1 and have a bunch of spells to back them up. So our opponent mulliganed. We are also going to mulligan, so that's fair. We can live with that. This hand is on the clunkier side. We've got 2 of our 5 mana cards, which we're not going to be able to play early, so it's a little bit scary. But we're already on 6, so I think we're kind of almost forced to keep this kind of hand. The Bolt is a tough one. I think we have to bottom it, even though Bolt's great. I think we have to try to go to hit our 5th land to be able to cast either Teferi or Baneslayer. Okay. Serum Visions is nice. Do we want to cast it right now, though, is the question. I think I'm going to hold off and just play this Hallowed Fountain tapped. Sometimes waiting on the Serum Visions is better to give you more information of what you're looking for. Westvale Abbey could be bad news depending on where this game ends up going. 3 creatures already on our opponent's side of the board. So there's a land. Alright, I'm going to Serum Visions and keep up the Path to Exile. So we're actually at the point where we've now found most of the lands we're looking for. So we certainly bottom one of these lands. I'm going to bottom them both, though, and just bank that we'll at some point draw that 5th land. But we may be forced into a situation once again where we need a card like Supreme Verdict. I mean, this is very scary. What our opponent's got out on the board is very scary. This could be a very bad turn for us. It's really just going to depend on what this is. Okay, so it's an Archdruid. So we can path that. So it looks like that may just be our opponent's play for the turn. Another copy of Serum Visions. Okay. I think we play it for sure. Azcanta. So we did find the verdict. And we drew, yes, we found Supreme Verdict. We see Search for Azcanta and Snapcaster. I'm going to put the Snapcaster on top. And so the question is, do we play the Steam Vents tapped? It could give our opponent the opportunity to go off with the Devoted Druid. But I'm also not confident that the Logic Knot will end up being effective. So I'm just going to play it tapped. It also kind of like encourages our opponent to commit more to the board. And we're pretty likely to just Supreme Verdict on our next turn. Kind of regardless of what goes on here. And our opponent might just have lands considering the way they're playing. I think I like Supreme Verdict here. I mean, our opponent could actually company end of turn. I don't believe they have the company, but it's certainly possible that they do. And the reason why I say that is just based on the way they're playing the game. They might have company main phase. So we'll see. We'll see. Maybe they have it. Could be a Chord too. There's the 2 mana. Okay, no. So our opponent did not, in fact, have it. That was just kind of a bluff play, more or less. And now we're kind of regretting putting that 5th land on the bottom if we don't get it here. But we do have other things we can do, including this cryptic command. Yeah. Say just pass the turn. We have the counter magic now. I mean, we're scared of like some sort of Vizier combo so that our opponent can make infinite mana. So yeah, 1 damage. Our opponent hasn't established that fast clock that they'd really like to have. Okay, so now the question is, do we make a play end of turn? I think we do. I think we just want a cryptic command to bounce something. Probably just the Devoted Druid. And we'll see if our opponent now has something to say about this. They could activate Westvale Abbey. During their end of turn step. But then we know that they kind of just don't have anything here. Or if they drew something like a Chord or a Company. Okay, so it's Chord for 3. Unfortunately, it's sometimes hard to interact with the instant speed stuff out of the elf deck, so we're just forced to let that resolve. We'll see what our opponent can find with it. So it's going to be Eternal Witness. That can return the cord. So it kind of allows our opponent to chain Chord of Callings. And so that's a heads-up play. Our opponent decided that they wanted to prevent us from drawing the card by just letting their Devoted Druid go, which I'm honestly okay with. That was arguably the scariest card our opponent had on the board. And we just pass here. If our opponent attacks with the Witness and the Druid, that means that they are not courting for as much. The X can't be as big. We have the Logic Knot. What we're trying to do is situate this so that we get to Logic Knot at the right time. We can also just go for Snap plus Path here, which would use our mana. Pretty nicely. Yeah, I kind of like Snap Path. Okay. Let's try this. This way we still have the Logic Knot up until our opponent's end of turn, so we don't necessarily have to use the path. But we'd like the board to be a little bit cleaner for when we get one of our 5 mana cards onto the battlefield. Okay, there's an Archdruid. That's actually a pretty juicy target for this path. I'm not sure our opponent sequenced this right. I mean, they know we're trying to path, and now they can't chord anymore. We know they have that Chord of Calling in hand. But now we've set up the exact situation that we want, where we can play out our Teferi. We can play out our Teferi and plus, and then still have the Logic Knot. So this worked out. That last sequence worked out really nicely. I'm happy that we chose to play that Snapcaster there. This deck does have a lot of those little decisions, and now if you look at our clock, we're on 4 minutes, so I do have to we have to try to close this thing out now. Luckily, this Baneslayer Angel is in hand Do we fight over a copy of Dwinnen's Elite? Not sure the answer to that. I think I'm going to, though. Just because of being scared about the Westphal that's in play. This allows our opponent to have an opening to cast the Chord of Calling. But they might have had the opening to do that anyways. And I'm not sure. They can Chord for 2. That might just be another Dwinnen's Elite, though, honestly. They could also attack. But no great options for our opponents. Sure. Lightning Helix, that's a really nice draw. So I think I am gonna just aggressively start using removal. Once again, making that Chord of Calling be for less. Get our Baneslayer into play, which is the easiest way of closing things out. And we'll see what our opponent can do from here. We've certainly cleared the board off, which is really what you want to do with this deck. All right, so our opponent is going to shock themselves with the Temple Garden. So here's a big chord. Chord for 2. I wonder what this is going to be for. Scavenging Ooze? Okay. Well, we have Teferi, so we can actually use the minus mode on Teferi, which could be really effective here. Just to get that Scavenging Ooze off the board. They're trying to gain some life. Makes sense. Can't fault them for doing that. Snap is a really nice pickup. So we have Snap plus Counterspell. We can also activate the Colonnade to block if we want to. Alright, I guess I'm going to go for the Colonnade. And that is going to do it. So here we are on the draw. I'm going to keep. Looks like our opponent did mulligan already, but has kept their 6. And this is a pretty solid opener. Can't ask for much more than this. Darkslick Shore is interesting. Alright, so our opponent is going to be able to break our draw up with this Inquisition. Gotta wonder exactly what our opponent's playing, though. They're going to take the Logic Knot. So I'm just going to go Celestial Colonnade here and pass back. Okay, Spire of Industry and Mox Opal. So this might be Lantern Control. Lantern Control has definitely lost some popularity, but it looks like that is what our opponent's playing. So we see an Ensnaring Bridge on top of our opponent's deck, and we see a Scalding Tarn on top of ours. So what looked like a pretty good draw all of a sudden looks a lot worse. I think before our opponent starts getting, we were hoping our opponent doesn't have a way to mill us here. So I like shuffling and trying to get as many good cards into our hand as possible. So just using the Scalding Tarn there. I don't think we want the Bolt, but Teferi is pretty good. So I'm going to keep the Teferi, pass the turn, hope that the Teferi does not get milled. So we know about Ensnaring Bridge. Okay. There's the Codex Shredder. So our opponent had just one of these really good Lantern draws, which is going to be pretty tough to come back from. We're just not playing that many win cons in our deck. We know about that Ensnaring Bridge. It's a pretty discouraging feeling at this point, certainly. Could go for a shuffle now. Yeah, we just don't want to draw the... I mean, sometimes you want to stack up your fetch lands a little bit. But here, trying to go for the more aggressive route. Not paying off, though. So, yep, just very flooded. Teferi is one of the cards we needed this game. There's a Pyxis of Pandemonium. I do not want that to resolve, so I'm going to counter it. And just playing out a Colonnade here. Snapcaster would be one of our decent draw steps here. But our opponent is going to mill it. So they only have one actual mill rock. We can try to filter a lot of lands out of our deck. Here's a negate. I wonder if our opponent cares about the negate. I guess the answer is they do not care about the negate. But they know we have it. Okay. In this matchup, you have a way of accumulating a lot of cards you do not want. And that's what is happening. Our opponent kind of has just enough stuff. Here. To keep us off doing anything. And here's a Flooded Strand. think pretty soon I'll be ready to pack it in. I mean, but you never want to concede too early. The Lightning Helix. There's a logic knot. Okay. The issue with this board state is we just have so few ways to win the game. There's one Teferi. Search for Azcanta would be a good draw. But yeah, that makes sense. Our opponent has Thoughtseize, and then they have Word of Invention in hand. So I think I've seen enough. Okay. So sideboard, we do get more stuff. Wear Tear is good. Engineered Explosives is good for sure. Dispel is only okay. It counters their War of Inventions, which is relevant. So we might want to bring those in. Vendilion Click is reasonable. We just want more threats. Like, V-Click is definitely better than a card like Baneslayer Angel. That's for sure. Elspeth seems okay. Runed Halo can actually stop the Codex Shredder. It's a weird interaction. So I think we want those. We certainly do not want our removal. Supreme Verdict is bad. Sometimes they do bring in Planeswalkers, or some alternative win conditions, but I still don't think we want Path to Exiles. We'll probably just take out some additional burn. Baneslayer is the only other card I could see, just like as a way to win, but it's pretty vulnerable to Ensnaring Bridge. I kind of like this configuration. We're still able to operate at instant speed, and we have way fewer dead cards. So I have a feeling we're gonna be in a lot better spot than in the last game. Oh, this is a tough one. Bolt is one of our worst cards in the matchup. I think we're too vulnerable of just getting locked out with this hand. This seems better. Now this is interesting. I'm actually going to put this Search for Azcanta on top. And here's why. I can play the fetch lands. So if our opponent has a turn 1 discard spell, they're probably going to take Search for Azcanta, like an Inquisition or a Thoughtseize. If they don't, then we use the Scalding Tarn. So since they don't, we're going to use the Scalding Tarn because we don't want 2 searches. Funny how some of the same cards find the way to the top of your deck sometimes. I mean, it's possible our opponent boarded in enchantment removal just for search, because it is very good in the matchup. So they picked up a Thoughtseize. We may get Thoughtseize this turn. Looks like our opponent is not able to turn on that Mox Opal just yet. Well, I think we bin the excess copy of search. So our opponent's certainly coming out of the gates slower. They might have a card like Bridge here. Yep. So that's going to turn on the Mox Opal. Looks like they don't want to cast the Thoughtseize until the Logic Knot is in our hand. Which makes a decent amount of sense. Oh, wow. So they did board in Abrupt Decay, which is an answer to our search for Azcanta. That's a problem. That is definitely a problem. Second copy of Bridge. Do we want to counter that, is the question. I believe we do. I lean towards saying yes. I mean, it's hard to get through. We actually have to win the game somehow. I mean, resolving Teferi is good. Certainly. Yeah, I'm going to go for the Logic Knot. We are going to get Thoughtseized here, most likely, but beating 2 copies of Ensnaring Bridge is pretty tough. Okay, maybe I was mistaken that our opponent. I thought our opponent had a Thoughtseize. In any case, that worked out for us. I'm gonna put the Serum Visions in the graveyard. I think, yeah. Ooh, okay. So we're drawing another search. That's probably bad for our opponent. So we have this Snapcaster Mage. I think I'm just going to go Snapcaster plus Serum Visions. Which allows us to have a creature in play, but also get that land, the Colonnade into play immediately. We still have the Dispel hidden. So I think we want to keep the Vendilion Clique on top of our library here. We'd love for our opponent to cast a War of Inventions at some point. Oh, but it looks like this is why our opponent did not cast the Thoughtseize. Well, I'm going to dispel this. So now our opponent... Well, our opponent only has one... Okay, they do have 2 black mana, so they did have the Thoughtseize, which was slow rolled. I wonder if they want to take the Teferi or not. And yeah, they did take the Teferi, which was kind of as expected. I mean, Teferi basically forces our opponent to have a needle. To stop it. So that's interesting. Our opponent... Our opponent played out the second Mox Opal and is now passing the turn. Well, I think we put the Vendilion Clique into the graveyard and transform our search. That seems fairly straightforward. I mean, we do want the Clique, but the transformed Azcanta is very valuable to us. We can actually attack here. Opponent's still got 2 cards in hand. And this is weird because it feels like our opponent was leaving up mana for War of Invention, but now we can respond with Azcanta to find this logic knot that our opponent sees on top of our deck. So this exchange seems really good for our side. There's also a negate there as well. Well, we certainly want one of the 2. I'm just going to go Logic Knot. And we have a negate on top. So things are starting to look good for the home team here. And I believe the last card in our opponent's hand is that Abrupt Decay that we saw earlier. So now our opponent's drawing off the top of their library. We see that Ancient Stirrings there. So if we play out the search for Azcanta, it probably gets Abrupt Decayed. That's probably not the end of the world. I'm just going to pass the turn, though. I think we want to use our Azcanta. And we see the Spire of Industry. Don't want to let our opponent have a fresh card on top of their library. So let's counter that Ancient Stirrings. Okay, interesting. Electrolyze or Ruined Halo. Not sure which is better at this moment, but I'm going to take the Electrolyze. Elspeth on top. Alright, so I'm going to Electrolyze our opponent for 2. That allows us to draw this Elspeth right away. we know our opponent's drawing Spire of Industry, so we're able to manipulate our draws much better than our opponent can manipulate theirs. We're eventually likely to find a Cryptic Command, although here's Teferi. Teferi is better. So now we're kind of doing everything we want to be doing. And it looks like our opponent's seen enough, which makes sense. There's a point where the Lantern deck gets to a place where it just kind of takes over with the mill rocks, and then there's a point where we just take over the game with Search for Azcanta, and that's kind of what happens. Just having way fewer dead cards is really relevant here. So yeah, this configuration seems pretty good. I don't think I'm going to do much with it. Ugh. This looks pretty bad. Yeah, have to mulligan this. So we're both on 6. I don't think the 4th land is necessarily what we want to prioritize here. I'm going to put that on the bottom. Alright, Dispel on top of our library. I think it's decent enough that we're fine with drawing it, but it's not what we're looking for. Already having multiple counterspells in hand, but looks like our opponent's going to be able to strip away some of our counterspell redundancy. Is this going to be an Ancient Stirrings, perhaps? We shall see. Yep. Okay, so there's the Stirrings. Our opponent was able to get a Mox Opal out of that. So they've got their mana situated pretty well. And unfortunately, we're just forced to kind of sit here. I'm not gonna sack. Well, I guess I could sack the Strand. Yeah. We have Dispel in hand, so if our opponent has War, we can just Dispel it there. Secure the Waste on top. So that's decent. And the Field of Ruin is a way for us to shuffle libraries if we feel the need to do that. Yeah, I'm not going to fight over this Mishra's Bauble. Yeah, I don't think we really want to draw this island, and we don't really want our opponent to have this Ancient Stirrings. So, to me, that's a good enough reason to use the Field of Ruin. And naturally, our opponent draws Inventor's Fair. So we don't know what that last card our opponent has in hand is. We do kind of want to keep Negate up, so I'm just going to pass rather than playing the Search for Azcanta. Now we can play Search and have double Counterspell available. I'm still kind of slow rolling this Secure the Waste to try to get maximum value off of it. Our opponent can sack this Inventor's Fair if they want to, but they might just want to draw the Inquisition. It looks like that's what they're going to do. So that's going to draw out a Negate. But it looks like we're going to be able to flip Search for Azcanta, which is kind of how we win these matchups. Although, I guess we still need to get a couple more cards in the graveyard for that. Logic Knot is a nice one to have, though. So I'm just going to pass. Force our opponent to make all of the moves. They're going to sacrifice Inventor's Fair. That means they get to... Oh, so they found Abrupt Decay. That is a problem. Yeah, we don't really want to let this Codex Shredder resolve. I'm gonna negate it. And there's the decay. Kind of as expected there. Still gonna hold off on the secure, I think. Wear Tear is a nice card to have on top. So now they've been waiting on this Mishra's Bauble. Looks like finally is the time. Now's the time to use it. And it looks like their last card may have been War of Invention this whole time. Which means we were right to keep up Counterspell mana. But this is great because we're operating with perfect information. And it looks like they actually took their... Oh no, they didn't. I thought for a minute they took they took themselves off of Mox Opal, but that wasn't the case. So here, we don't want to crack the Scalding Tarn because we know about the Wear Tear, which we do want to draw. But I am going to secure for 4. So maybe he could have played this. Admittedly, maybe he could have played the Secure the Waste earlier. Never felt like it was the perfect time to do so, though. We could also attack with this Celestial Colonnade. I don't actually mind that here. It just really shortens the clock. We have the Scalding Tarn we can sacrifice if need be. But we just want to kill our opponent as quickly as possible. I believe the last card in our opponent's hand is in Stirrings. So here's the Inquisition of Kozilek. We're not going to fight over that. Simply no reason to. Our opponent can take the Logic Knot, but then we still have Wear Tear. Or they take the Wear Tear and we still have Logic Knot. Okay, so it looks like this opens the door for them to get a clean Ancient Stirrings off. And they found Academy Ruins, which is decent, but I don't think it's going to be enough. It's our opponent's under too much pressure. They're not going to have enough time to start Academy Ruins and things. And besides that, they have no Ensnaring Bridge. So, yeah, this game, I think we're going to win this one. I don't see... Yep, so that's going to do it. Alright, so it looks like we did win the die roll. And... yeah, this hand seems reasonable enough. I'm going to keep it. And we always want to get in our come into play tap lands. We want to get those onto the battlefield first. So we're probably going to lead on Search for Azcanta. Although, okay, Inquisition of Kozilek. Interesting. So our opponent may actually just take away our Search for Azcanta. It's going to really depend what deck our opponent is on. If it's a Jund style deck. Yeah, so they are just going to take the Search, which is kind of one of the engine cards, the card advantage cards of this deck. I don't think there's... I think I'm just going to play the Celestial Colonnade. It does allow our opponent to operate with perfect information, but I'm not sure that's a huge deal here. Although, since they're sacrificing the Polluted Delta, I was about to say maybe they're not on Jund, but there's the Overgrown Tomb. So, Tarmogoyf is a 3/4 here, which is pretty frustrating considering our current hand. Cryptic Command, okay. So that's not bad. We have the option of which land to play. I'm just going to play the Hollowed Fountain tapped. We may eventually just have to start firing these burn spells off somewhat randomly, but we're not at that point. We can also just double Helix the Tarmogoyf potentially as well. So here's a Thoughtseize. That's going to nab the Cryptic Command. Alright, so it's not Jund, it's probably Death Shadow now that we see the Street Wraith get sacrificed. And the Tarmogoyf is up to a 5/6, which Now our opponent is kind of in range of just getting burned out, though, so we may want to forget about the idea of pointing these burn spells at the Goyf. Yeah, I kind of like going at our opponent's face. I mean, we've got 8 points of burn in our hand, and our opponent's at 8. There's a search for Azcanta. Okay, so we can deploy that. If our opponent had a Death Shadow, they could have played it last turn. But now it is going to be more difficult to get around a Death Shadow. It's going to be a bigger threat. But I think our opponent's going to really want to try to find another creature threat. Ooh, is this a Temur Battle Rage? If it is, our opponent's really trying to end this game ASAP. They could have a Stubborn Denial, but I'm still going to go for the Lightning Helix, because we'd actually, I think, be alright with it getting Stubborn Denialed. Huh, there's a Field of Ruin. Do we want that? Taking our opponent off. Messing with our opponent's mana could be pretty useful. Like, say our opponent has a hand. So, this deck doesn't normally play that many basics, so they... Yeah, this is tough. So we can use the Field of Ruin and the Electrolyze. Alright, I'm gonna keep it. We'll see how this works out for us. So we can play the Field of Ruin here. I guess I'm just gonna go after this Watery Grave. It's either the Blood Crypt or the Watery Grave. Okay, yeah, so no basic island as expected there. So I'm just gonna use the Electrolyze to deal our opponent 2 damage. We are dead to another Temur Battle Rage, but if our opponent... So now we found a Snapcaster. So that's pretty good. If we're able to untap. There's a Traverse the Oven Walls. What is that going to find? Our opponent's at 2. Oh, it's a Scavenging Ooze. That's interesting. So that actually potentially disrupts our Snapcaster Mage. Which really sucks. So we'll see if our opponent is savvy enough to to not use the Scavenging Ooze. It looks like they're not going to use it here. So they're bricking off our Snapcaster. Potentially, although maybe they're considering using the Ooze. So we definitely don't want the Scalding Tarn, so we'll put that in the graveyard. We get to transform Azcanta. We're looking for a burn spell here. Or possibly a Path to Exile wouldn't actually be bad either. I mean, there's not much use just playing out the Snapcaster Mage, considering what our opponents play, but what we could do is we could go for a Celestial Colonnade kill. That's the other line here. The issue with that is that if our opponent has a Fatal Push, we would lose. We would lose to Fatal Push. Not sure if that's better or worse than activating Search for activating Azcanta here. I guess worst case scenario, we can play out this Snapcaster as a blocker. I'm going to go for this. I'm going to go for the Colonnade kill. And okay. So, yeah, I was playing around Stubborn Denial with the Field of Ruin. Sorry if that wasn't super clear there. But that was definitely a card that our opponent could have, was representing in that spot. Probably did have, if I had to guess. So in terms of sideboarding, that was definitely a weird one. A weird game. We don't need the negate. A lot of these cards are pretty good in this matchup. We don't need to do that much. I like Runed Halo a decent amount. I think we bring it in here. The Purges are interesting. They get rid of like Liliana's and the Death Shadows. So I think we want at least one. Some of the more expensive stuff can be hit or miss. Explosives is pretty good as well. It can get rid of a Goyf or a Shadow. I think we want to shave on some of the more expensive cards. And some of the weird burn spells that aren't as good. We were able to burn our opponent out that game. But the burn is not necessarily always the plan. So I think we want to bring in more hard removal. And take out burn spells like Electrolyze. Elspeth is an interesting card. We can win with an Elspeth. Potentially. Alright. Yeah, Bolt doesn't match up super well against cards like Death Shadow and Tarmogoyf, but if you draw enough of Bolts and Helixes, as we did in the last game, it becomes a pretty big problem for that deck. This is quite the hand. We have Serum Visions. But if our opponent hits us with a turn 1 discard spell, we don't draw the second land, it's definitely bad for us. It's a close one. I think I'm going to mulligan it, though. Like, we really want We really want this card, Path to Exile. This seems fine. Not actually sure if this hand is better. I think it is, but we don't have... I mean, we're down a card. I think we have to put this on the bottom. You really do want an opening hand with a Serum Visions or Search, which we don't have, because it allows you to make plays early on and help filter your draws better. So our opponent's bobbling and then targeting themselves to see if they want to crack this fetch land or draw the card that they saw with the Mishra's Bauble. Okay, so they did have the discard spell. And now they probably just end up taking a Snapcaster Mage. Our hand has a decent amount of answers. Okay, we're a little bit a ways from Elspeth, but we're also in a pretty good spot in terms of not being under a tremendous amount of pressure. Perhaps we'll see something like a Tarmogoyf come down. Nope, it's going to be an aggressively cast Death Shadow as a 1/1. That's interesting. Well, I'm not going to path it right now. I think we can hold off on that play. Don't think we're going to get... I don't think the Death Shadow is going to get huge at the moment. It certainly could become more significant. So, yep, just going to get a Steam Vents. Give us access to all three of our colors. Serum Visions was pretty good. I think we want to cast that here. And lands are what we're looking for. Unfortunately, we don't have the second white as one of these lands, which is kind of a problem, though. I think I'm just gonna keep the island, because we want the second white for the verdict at some point. So past the turn here, we can path if we feel the need to do so. So now Death Shadow is a 4/4. I think I like the idea more of using the explosives and playing that for 1 as a way to get rid of it. So yeah, let's try just playing explosives for 1. Okay, so that's going to resolve. So the question now is, do we sacrifice it right away? Yeah, I think so. Just save the damage. Our opponent might have another Death Shadow, certainly. Okay, traverse. Traverse for Snapcaster Mage. and another Death Shadow. Okay, so they had what they were looking for there. So they can Snapcaster Mage the Traverse, the Inquisition, a few different options. I kind of like just casting this Supreme Verdict here. Just to be mana efficient. It's going to slow our opponent down. They still have the Snapcaster we already know about. But we don't know about any... They might not have any more Death Shadows or Tarmogoyfs. Okay, here's the Snap. Is this going to be a Traverse? Yeah, so it's going to be Traverse. That makes sense. That's a way for them to shuffle their deck if they didn't like the card they saw with the Mishra's Bauble. And now they found another Death Shadow. So, looks like we're going to have to slog through a bunch of Death Shadows this game. We do have an opening now for the Secure the Waste. So, yep, just going to go for the Secure the Waste while our opponent is tapped out. And we can use these blockers to help preserve our life total. Trade a warrior for a Snapcaster. Then still have 2 left over. Seems reasonable. We can realistically just make our way through all of our opponent's Death Shadows in this game. That's a real thing that could happen. Okay. That's actually pretty annoying. They can take one of our Path to Exiles. So they know about the Elspeth that's maybe coming down shortly. I like using up a path. Once again, playing around Stubborn Denial. And we do want to attack. I think I'm just going to send one of the warriors in, just offer that trade. Looks like our opponent actually does not want to trade there. Interesting. So now they know we're potentially 1 turn away from both attacking with Celestial Colonnade and playing Elspeth. So the Colonnade was a pretty good draw. I think we just have to oblige our opponent here. See what their follow-up is. Okay, Tarmogoyf. Yeah, that's kind of annoying. But we drew a land. This is interesting. So we can either play out Elspeth or start getting in with Colonnade. If we play out Elspeth, we may run into the counterspell. So it's not the easiest decision here, I don't think. Our opponent has 2 cards. We saw they discarded a Dismember earlier, which means they could still have another Dismember. Sometimes you just have to go with your gut. Could be wrong on this, but I'm just going to once again play around the Stubborn Denial and just put our opponent on what is a 2-turn clock. So if our opponent doesn't have the removal spell here, they are in a really bad spot, most likely. So that attack does get through. So our opponent doesn't have the answer. Alright, so we get to be on the play. This one. And this is fine. Serum Visions is one of those cards you're really looking for in your opener, certainly. However, when scrying with it, we can get faced with tough decisions if we play it immediately. So I'm just going to lead on Celestial Colonnade. Basically, it's the scrying is much more difficult without knowing what the matchup is. Okay, so just Bloodstained Mire from our opponent doesn't actually tell us what we are playing against still. I'm going to go with the Scalding Tarn because it allows us to logic not for 1. And we don't know what we're up against, so it's just kind of feels safe. Okay, there's Overgrown Tomb. So we're playing against Jund. It seems like Jund. We have 2 blue-red lands in hand, so I'm just going to get a blue-white here. And I think we can now safely cast the Serum Visions and with a better idea of what we're looking for. And in this matchup, you just want kind of as much gas as you can get your hands on. It's a little bit weird that our opponent hasn't really done much. Although here is a Lily. I'm just going to Logic Knot it. And even though this kind of sucks, I think we just want to shock ourselves with this Steam Vents. Our opponent should probably realize we have some sort of 4-mana card here. But on the flip side, they don't have a ton of options but to play something out here, hopefully. Yeah, it's going to be a Goyf, which I think we want a Cryptic Command to be able to draw a card for sure. Counter draw is just a clean 2 for 1. Secure the Waste, that's a nice one. That's a win condition, potentially. Alright, so Bloodbraid Elf into a Tarmogoyf. That is interesting. We could Snapcaster Logic Knot away the Goyf. Yeah, I think that's the play that I like the most. Bloodbraid Elf is one of those cards that is definitely annoying for the control decks because of the cascade. You can't just use a counterspell to cleanly counter it. And the reason why I Logic Knotted the way I did was so that we could use the Lightning Bolt there to take care of the Bloodbraid. Yeah, I'm going to pass here. I think there's a decent chance we want to secure the waste for 4. Scavenging Ooze is interesting here. We can use a decent amount of our resources in order to get rid of it by going Snapcaster Lightning Bolts, and then we can Bolt Helix it away. That might just be our best option. Because otherwise the Snapcaster Mage just becomes pretty bad. So our opponent can start munching on their own creatures in order to make this into a 4-power guy, and then we are forced to Helix it. So that is what happens. I think we're still in quite a nice spot because we have the aggression, we have the stronger board presence, and we still have gas in hand. Okay, so I think our opponent's forcing us to reveal a card here. We're certainly going to respond with Secure the Waste. So they could have Maelstrom Pulse to get rid of the Warriors. That would be the best thing, but it's just Dark Confidant, and I think this game is going to be over shortly. There we go. So in terms of sideboarding, Celestial Purge is really good. It deals with Bob and Lily, and being able to exile cards is good. Also Bloodbraid. Elves Best is the other card that I like. It's a Planeswalker. Planeswalkers are generally pretty good against Jund. And if we're able to cast it, we're going to win most of those games pretty quickly after casting it. Not a huge fan of Negate in the matchup. That's the easiest card to take out, in my opinion. Another card that we could consider is Explosives, but we just have so many good cards in this type of matchup that it's hard to actually pick what we want. So I think I'm just going to go with this. Nothing, not really changing too much. This is generally one of your matchups you don't mind playing against, certainly. With Jeskai, I'm going to keep this one. You're also not as vulnerable to discard because you have really good top decks. So for opponents, I mean, our opponent's really looking for discard into something like a Bob and then have that, you know, sort of translate into some card advantage. I'm going to take the search away from us, which I can understand. Search is a scary card. So we're really looking for lands here, or card filtering like Serum Visions. But yeah, like if our opponent, say, plays a Liliana on the next turn, decent chance they are able to, they have a card like that in hand. It could become an issue. Alright, so now we have our mana starting to come together a little bit more, which is good. Wow, a lot of discard. Certainly not going to respond to this. Looks like they're going for Teferi, so they're trying to play a longer game with us. We'll see how that goes for our opponent. And there's one of those top decks that could be problematic for our opponent. Search for Azcanta. Now, they could have a card like Abrupt Decay, like Maelstrom Pulse, like something along those lines, but if we're able to flip the search, that would be really good. Could be a Bloodbraid Elf, though, incoming. That could Bloodbraid into something. Okay, so it's not a Bloodbraid, it's a Scavenge Use, which is less threatening, certainly. But it is annoying. It keeps us off flipping search for a little while longer. We do have this Lightning Helix that we can use, though. I'm going to bin the Snapcaster Mage. Yeah, gonna go ahead and pass the turn here. I think we want to go for the Helix now so that our opponent doesn't get to continue to gobble things up from our graveyard. So we're at 5 cards in yard with the Flooded Strand. Okay, if our opponent's passing the turn, that is a little bit surprising, but it's probably good news. Could mean a card like a Colligan's Command. Some sort of instant speed removal spell. I think I'm just going to put the Helix in the graveyard, getting us closer to flipping that search. And there's a Cryptic, which is really nice. 4 mana, Cryptic Command, at a high life total. And our opponent's not doing too much. And it is a Colligan's Command, but now we can just Cryptic Command it. Which seems like a pretty straightforward choice. Okay. I'm gonna get rid of the Supreme Verdict, I think. Our opponent has no creatures in play besides the Treetop Village that's a land, so Supreme Verdict does not affect it. Lily's good. We have those Celestial Purges we boarded in that we are looking for here. We also have Search, which allows us to continue to draw cards. And we have the Snapcaster. We can go Snapcaster Helix to try to slow down the Liliana. Well, the Fulminator Mage is pretty unfortunate. I think we don't want to let it resolve. Now I'm kind of wishing we had been one of the Logic Knots so we could go Snapcaster plus Logic Knot. But in any case, I'm just going to Logic Knot it. I think paying full price for the knot. Yeah. Okay, so, well, maybe we don't pay full price for it. Maybe we want to be able to just play Snapcaster out as a 2-1 to attack Lily. Nah, it doesn't seem great. I'm just gonna Logic Knot. So we need to do it for 4. The Lily does get to plus and get our other Logic Knot. So the game is a little bit closer than I thought. Fulminator Mage was a good draw. Cryptic is nice. It's more of a question of how to use it. I think we just pass. I don't even know how great Cryptic is. So here, I like countering. I think we just counter draw. Gives us an additional card in hand. We could also bounce the Lily to offset it a little bit. I'm gonna counter draw though. Just allows us to keep a card in hand, which is pretty valuable here. So the treetop is able to get in. So we have this Snapcaster Mage in hand. The question is how we want to use it. We have Helix, so we could Helix the Lily. We could also bounce the Lily. And say draw something like bounce and draw. Seems pretty reasonable. Alright, I guess I'm going to go with the Helix play. Just to gain some life. This does mean our opponent can minus to just get rid of our Snapcaster, but then the Lily goes down to 1 loyalty, and it's not as threatening. So I think we're still favored here, but if our opponent finds something good, like a Bloodbraid Elf type card, like another threat, and you know, it's definitely close. There's Teferi. Okay, that was good. That was a nice pickup, I think. Let's see. I guess our opponent is 1 land away from being able to activate both Ravine and Treetop, which is pretty bad for us. With that being said, I think we still want to play it in plus. Secure the Waste. That is an interesting find. Okay. So we can secure the Waste for 2. If our opponent ticks Lily up, we will certainly do that. Okay. So they're just doing that right now. So we get to secure for 2. I wonder what our opponent's draw was. Okay, Inquisition of Kozilek, that makes a lot of sense. So the Warriors are now relevant because they can attack this Liliana. So our opponent's trying to kind of maximize these man lands. There's the Raging Ravine. It's going to attack Teferi. I think we let Teferi go to 1 here. We can use the Warriors to get rid of Lily. Hope to draw something. This does mean we're probably going to have to let Teferi die, but not sure that's... Okay, well, we might not have to let Teferi die with that draw step. So definitely going to get rid of the Lily and pass. We now have Snapcaster plus plus, say, Cryptic Command. I could have actually cast Serum Visions. That was probably a mistake not to cast Serum there, because we had the untapped 2 lands from Teferi. But it's all good. Looks like our opponent has found... Okay, so just found a land. I think we go Snapcaster and then just tap our opponent's squad down with Cryptic. That seems good. And this just allows us to draw more cards. It allows us to keep the Teferi in play for at least another turn. So let's use the Serum first. Okay, there's another Cryptic. We drew a path. So we can actually hold back some creatures if we want to. Yeah, I think I like this. So we're gonna attack here. Then we can actually just go for an Azcanta activation. That's good. Now we get to untap 2 lands. So we have this chump blocker kind of back if we need it. But our opponent's just going to concede.